Hi, welcome to the Cloud Currents podcast. My name is Greg Ahlheim. I'm your host. And today we're being visited by Andi Mann. Andi is the founder and global CTO of Sageable. It's a research and advisory firm focused on digital transformation and cloud. Andi has more than 25 years experience across a lot of different IT roles: CTO, cloud architect, VP of products, as well as many other things. And he's worked with very large companies like Uber, Box, Splunk, and he helped those companies shape technology strategy and execution. So Andi, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you today. I've been looking forward to this.
Thanks, Greg. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So you have a really diverse background, and it looks like it's all centered around technology research that allows you to help other companies with their strategy. Tell me about how that started for you and how you got to where you are. It seems like a really interesting story.
Yeah, look, I started doing sort of research and analysis and working with the analyst community way back in my days when I was living in Australia, back when I was running IT operations, doing work at coalface for banks, insurance companies, mining, oil and gas. And I started to do evaluations of software solutions for implementations. I was leading a small team, project manager. So I'm trying to figure out what software do we need? What's going to make us better as a business? What can make my team more efficient, more productive? So I start to look for different opportunities to acquire different software products and start to work with software vendors, start to work with analysts that do research into the market to figure out what's good, what's great. And subsequently, I actually spent some time in IT and in vendor world with companies like New Dimension Software out of Israel, BMC Software out of Houston, Texas. And subsequently joined a company called Enterprise Management Associates, actually here where I live now in Boulder, Colorado, in the United States. And that got me into 5 years worth of deep research, market research, use cases, ROI and total cost of ownership type of calculation, doing feature function comparisons and competitive intelligence, and helping a lot of the software vendors who were my clients at that time to grow in the marketplace. Subsequently took all of that knowledge and started building products again at CA Technologies and subsequently at Splunk, where I was working with, as you pointed out, some amazing large enterprises in the world, some of the best enterprises in the world. And I continued to look at this function as an advocacy function. How can I advocate for my customers to help my business build better software for them? Because that lets me advocate to other customers to sell my software to help them do better work. So it's always been about growing businesses, creating innovation, doing new work in new ways to help grow my business. And I think if you don't understand where you're coming from, so the market research and analysis side, it's really hard to build that strategy and that plan that's going to get you where you want to go. And so now with Sageable, I'm back in the analyst business, doing original research, analyzing results of other people's research, looking at the market features and functions, products, solutions, challenges, use cases, and just trying to match that all up so that my customers, whether they're technology innovators, technology investors, or end users of technology, are meeting at the right point to drive all of their business up.
Yeah. One of the things that I when I was reading a little bit about your company that I found just, really interesting and cool, in there somewhere I read that your advisory services are centered around actionable research. And, that landed with me because I think about a lot of companies who are they have access to research articles, all of the different places that you can get research. It's taking those inputs. How do you think about using them to customize to direct outcome for some transformation or some strategy or some growth, whatever the business driver is, and I think that's an interesting thing because there's sometimes an overwhelming amount of research. Being able to sort through all of that and figure out like what's important for me, what can I use as a business leader to advance my company's agenda, the growth, the savings, whatever it is. Is that sort of the way you think about research is taking all of that together, focusing that narrowly on the outcomes of the business you're helping, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. You got to understand, what does it mean? What can I do with this? Otherwise you're just reading for reading's sake. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of reading, but when I want to read, for no reason at all. I'll read fiction or maybe an autobiography or something. But if I want to drive my business forward, yeah, there's a lot of research. And some of it's really good. Some of it's actually really not. But some of it really is good. But it's a case of how do I then take that and do something with it? So if I've got a piece of research that talks about, for example, developer productivity and how developers are productive and how they're not, teaming and collaboration techniques and processes, and I've written research like this, the State of DevOps reports. I was an author of multiple versions of that. It's seminal research in my field. But what we looked at there was, for example, not just what practices are driving business forward, what practices and processes and attitudes make developers or help developers to be more productive. We actually looked at what were the antecedents of that. And what happened first, and then what outcomes happened afterwards when you followed these sort of known good patterns. And so that's been a thread throughout my research, throughout my analysis, and my advice to my customers is getting down to that bottom line of what do I actually do about this? Is it even helpful to say these things, to reveal this data, if none of my clients can actually do anything? I'm just wasting their time. So I'm really looking for those actionable morsels. Whether it's data or analysis or even opinion, having a path forward where I can take this data point and say, well, if I extrapolate from this, then I can do these things which will have these results. Going back years, I've talked about measuring activities versus metrics that matter. There's so many vanity metrics in the world, especially in middle management. But the metrics that matter are the things that actually deliver results against your business goals. And that's what I'm trying to get to. What can we do to help achieve those business goals, whether it's productivity or revenue, profit, growing partnerships, growing a customer base, expanding into new markets? What do I do that's going to make a difference? That's where I focus, yeah.
Yeah, and for those who like you have a focus on research and advisory, how do you tell a good piece of research input from something you may not want to use? Are there any markers or anything that you would say, well, I'm going to question that piece because X, Y, or Z, whatever those reasons might be? How do you tell?
Yeah, there's some things that I see. I always take a look at vendor research a little bit skeptically. Look, I've owned and run vendor research at CA Technologies, at Splunk, at others, and I'm doing that for two reasons often. One is inbound insight, learning what is happening, actually using that research for product planning, for strategy planning, for M&A, these sorts of things. The other thing I absolutely am using that to gain awareness and engagement with customers and prospects. So I publish certain parts of my research. And this is actually a little dirty little secret that people don't know. When vendors publish research, they don't necessarily publish all of their research. They publish the good stuff, right? And they publish the stuff that's not going to help their competitors do that. So I always look a little skeptically at vendor research. Not that vendor research is necessarily bad, but always take that skeptical eye and try and figure out what's missing as well as what's including. But look at things like who ran the research, a reputable organization, or was it just some product marketing leader who just put a survey on Zoho, right? Do they understand analytics? Do they understand statistics? Do they understand, standard deviations and how population samples work? Just look at that fundamentals of statistics of who did the research. Look at the demographics. Are they your kind of business? Did they show if you're running a 500-person business and the research is all 10,000 people businesses, it's not going to really play well for you. You have to make your own choices and balance on that. Similarly, geographical locations, roles and titles that were surveyed. So a lot of it is basic statistics, Greg. It's understanding how research data comes to be and then analyzing whether it applies to you. Doesn't say that if you fail some of these characteristics, it's bad, but it might not apply to your situation, your business, your use case. That's probably the biggest thing that I start with is just looking at that fundamentals of what the research is, who and how it was conducted, and whether it applies to me and my business or not. You'll rule out some 60% of all research just starting there. Yeah, lots of reasons. I finished up a role by design as a CTO of a public company, turning that around, doing cloud transformation, doing DevOps transformation, doing innovation planning and programs, and was pretty successful at what I did there. Have been successful in the past being an advocate for technology innovation, advocating for my customers at Splunk, at CA. And I thought, you know what? I want to have broader remit to be able to advocate on more things than just the products my company believes in and sells. So, at Splunk, at Hulu, at CA, I was helping to sell products by advocating for my company and helping build better products by advocating for my customers. But it was still an abounded set. At Sageable, I get to focus on the things that I've done my entire career without bounding it by my latest employer. All the things in IT operations. I started out in coalface at companies like American Express and Westpac and NatWest, Exxon, through these large multinational vendors, working with big companies, enterprises with great success. Like you say, large multinational brands, helping them run their IT, drive better business as a result. I just got excited by the idea of working with more people in different industries, in different companies, and just covering all things IT operations and cloud operations, whatever you call it, right? AI ops, cloud ops, prod ops, dev ops, sec ops, IT ops. If it's got ops in it, I'm about it. It's been my life. And so having that broad remit, being able to use my knowledge to help other people grow, get better, and also partially to do some of the non-product stuff. When you work for a software vendor, a lot of the time you have to focus on the product and sales and that sort of thing. And that's fair. That's how you make money. But I also want to work on some of the leadership things, the future of work, remote teaming, coaching senior leaders to build their teams and grow them even better, even remote. These are things I haven't had the opportunity to do in the past. I'm super excited to be able to.
Yeah, that's great. I'm definitely picking up the passion for what you do, all the ops things, right? So let's talk a little bit about IT strategy. When you, in your experience and you're helping companies, you probably are finding that they may be in the very beginning. They may have tried to execute on a strategy and not getting the results they want. Maybe they decide they need help, or they've done something and they need to undo it and redo, right? Kind of a reset. What would you say makes, a successful strategy? What are the pillars? What are the core fundamentals that make a successful strategy for a company around IT?
Yeah, that's a great question, Greg. Look, I'm going to say data starts with, you got to start with data. If everyone just brings their opinions, then let's use mine, because why not, right? It doesn't have to be right. I just have to talk loudest in that room. So start with data and start with real basis for making these decisions. What are you going to do? Why are you going to do it? Look at examples, look at case studies, understand the impact of what you're planning. Executive support. Oh my goodness, Greg, the number of times I've gone to clients and I've gone in at like a VP level or even an SCP level. And those leaders have been very excited to do some radical transformation things, but they're not getting the full level of support they need from a CEO and a CTO. Whether it's that financial support, whether it's allocating resources, teams, Scrum teams to new development efforts, allocating humans to innovation, not just business as usual. These are hard decisions which take people away from, things like customer support and other things to do innovation. So having that executive support, super important. Having the budget is important as part of that executive support too, right? You can do a lot on the sniffing of an oily rag, but ultimately, if you want to drive successful business innovation, you've got to have that budgetary support, which gives you the ability to partner better, to employ great experts, to take time away from business as usual and do imagination, creativity, innovation plan. It's absolutely critical to have a good sense of the market. Who are your competitors? What is the value there? What do customers really want? So all of this is strategic information which helps you build that plan. Then you can start to build your vision, your overall vision and your product vision. You can start to map that out in horizons, the old McKinsey thing, horizon 1, 2, 3, which is, I'm a bit of a fan of that myself. You can start to allocate resources along those horizons as well and start to actually do the work of executing on your strategy, which, by the way, you have written down and shared with everyone so everyone knows they're on the same page. So collaboration is super important as well. So these are some of the things that I look for when I go into an organization and start to review their strategy. You always look at what you did in the past that did not work. That should be part of your strategy going forward. You should admit to the challenges you face, the things you did right to face them, the things you did wrong as well, and what you're going to do differently. You need to have, I think, all of that data, that decision-making authority, that executive support, budget and resources, and a real understanding of what you're doing and why as it relates to your customers, your competitors, and the entire market. I think it's a really strong starting place if you can get there.
Yeah, I think in my career, looking back on where some of the things that the companies that I have worked with, where they have sort of stumbled and had to regroup, is around that executive alignment, right? And really setting and sharing and communicating priorities for the company, and making sure that all the downstream work is lining up to, those, whatever those key objectives are for the organization to be successful. I love that. I was thinking about, some of the trends that I've seen over the last couple of years. And one of the things that just constantly emerges is that the rate of change in and around technology now, and I know it's Moore's law, right? It's always going to be accelerating, but it seems like it leaped to a hyper, speed in the last few years. And probably some of that could have been the global pandemic, financial things changing, all of this stuff. It must make it more difficult for companies to map out a strategy when they're really kind of surrounded by technology that's changing. The global finance market, things are changing. Customer use cases are changing. It all just seems to be happening very, very fast. How should we think about that in the context of setting a strategy?
Yeah, look, Greg, that is so hard to manage, because you're right. I think you are right. There's a couple of specific trigger points that have caused exponential growth. Obviously, the internet was one. The web, not the internet itself, but the web and web applications, Web 2.0, that interactive mode, definitely part of the conversation. And then we move into high-speed automation. We move into cloud computing, of course, the ability to scale and build fast, the flexibility, agility, not to mention the low barriers to entry for new technologists, startups doing new cool things. You don't need to buy all your kit anymore. You just rent it for a couple of hours and see if it works, right? And then now, of course, we've got automation and AI. We can talk AI, is it not? But it's absolutely revolutionary. It's changing the way we do. And again, it's this exponential inflection point. What can you do about it as a business leader is really hard. You need good technology people. You need to rely on them. As a CEO or a COO, for example, even a chief revenue officer or a chief customer success officer in a business, you need to be able to rely on your technology leaders to follow all that and let you know what's real and what's not. I talk about AI, and AI is real to some and in a lot of ways, but also it's still not really passing a Turing test. It's still using very biased data sets. There's issues there. You can use it. I've used AI in my own practice in anger. In my last role, certainly. And even in my current role, I'm using AI. You've got to understand what it's good for and what it's not. What are you setting yourself up for and what are you not? Also, things like cybersecurity. What are the security implications of this new solution that you're looking at, these new technologies that you're looking at? Staying up to speed. As a non-technical leader, you really need to be careful about management by magazine. I have had so many leaders who aren't specifically technology leaders come to me and say, hey, Andy, what about this thing? What about blockchain? What about AI? What about quantum computing? In the past, even, what about cloud? What about virtualization? Are these going to help my business? For a COO, for a non-technical person, for a CEO, having trust in your technology advisors, on staff or not, to follow these markets and understand. One of the things that I used to do in my businesses when I was an employee was actually produce quarterly reports, quarterly technology reports for my leadership on what's happening in our world that we should be aware of. even weekly readouts of that sort of thing at very fast times. You know, right now, if I was still an employee, I'd be doing weekly readouts on AI. So you've got to trust your people. You've got to get that constant communication. You've got to have technology leaders who are committed to understanding and staying on top of all these changes and putting them into a business context for you, so you can focus on running the business, selling the stuff, keeping customers happy, whatever it is you're doing. I really fundamentally believe in that partnership model.
Yeah, I think you're right. And when you think about the responsibility of those IT leaders to track all the things that are going on, to be able to communicate that in a way that, like you said before, is actionable, right, and leads to real outcomes or well-informed decisions, maybe is a better way to think about it. What are the skills that make up a great IT leader? From your perspective, in your experience, aside from being great at technology things, right? Because just like you hope that your non-technology leaders will delve in a little bit, right, and be informed and participate. You kind of have to have the other side of that from your IT leaders, I think. Do you see that?
I agree. Yeah. Look, there's a lot of things that I look for, the soft skills or the non-technical skills, when I'm looking for leaders and when I'm working with leaders and helping them. Excuse me. There's a lot of the human side, right? Just leadership, just being a real human. As an IT leader, especially, you can't fall into the trap of the management consultants of treating people like resources the same way as you might in a customer service environment or retail or something like that. Almost by definition, every single person in your team is going to be pretty smart, pretty self-actuated. Technology is an interesting area where you attract a lot of people who want to work with computers and not with humans. So you need to be able to understand diversity of opinion, diversity of views, diversity of brain function, neurodiversity, because you're going to be working with neurodiverse people. I do look for and encourage people to foster diversity, equity, and inclusion just generally, because in my world, I believe in this inherently. But more importantly for me, I'm a business consultant. You do better business, you get better revenue, you create better products if you have more ideas. I try and look for and try and train inquisitiveness. It's one of the things that I love to do is ask people questions rather than tell them the answers. I'd much rather mentor someone by asking them to think deeply about something and try and tell them what I think about something. And so inquisitiveness drives innovation. And honestly, Greg, one thing that I do look for, a soft skill that I look for, is impatience. Not impatience with people, but impatience with inefficiencies, with productivity loss, with dumb ways of doing things. I lived and breathed automation for so much of my career. And a lot of that is because I'm impatient with stupid processes. I don't want to do mundane routine stuff over and over again. I want to get a computer to do more of that work so I can do creative things, innovative things. So I do actually try and teach my leadership, mentoring and so forth, this idea that you're going to want to demand better from your system. So it could be people or process, it could be technology, but as a technology leader, you should always be seeking to do better, drive more efficiency, drive more productivity, prevent problems reoccurring, prevent them from occurring in the first place. And this sort of inquisitiveness to drive productivity and efficiency is such a powerful attitude towards IT, specifically IT operations, but also all of IT.
Yeah, it is. I've seen the same in my career too. And I also think it's infectious. Once an organization figures out that you can automate some of those routine mundanes and that you can monitor or manage things proactively, that in itself is transformational. When you get everybody think, I love what you said about asking questions and getting the ideas. And I think, I've seen organizations come from the perspective of, hey, we've got some issues, and then, we don't know what to do with them, to, the entire company is aware of the issues and they're crowdsourcing ideas and thoughts from the people doing the work, oftentimes know better than others, and they don't always, they don't always seem to get a voice because they're very busy and, decisions might be being made other places. If we could talk a little bit about cloud things, cloud adoption, cloud management, the public cloud big three are still growing, exponentially, and you also see a lot of still even a lot of private cloud use cases, depending on where you are globally. Some places there's, it's a little more public cloud things, some places private cloud things. But, I like what you said about observability and having the ability to manage those things proactively and with a foundation to start with, not, well, we built some things, let's go build some best practices around them. How should companies think about building governance into their practice, not bolting it on after, right? What recommendations would you give?
Yeah, look, that's a really good point, Greg, that a lot of people need to get on top of. Cloud is other people's computers. You've got to have extra governance when you're there. Notwithstanding private cloud is your computers, but it's different techniques and different accessibility, different integrations, and you get these atomized environments. Every time you atomize an environment, you get exponential number of connections. You think about the Death Star that we see in architecture diagrams, cloud architectures, right? And by the way, everyone at home can do this right now. Get a piece of paper, get a pen, and draw one dot. That's like one server. Okay, draw another dot. Draw a line between them. That's communication part between two servers. Now draw two more dots, connect them all. Count the lines. Exponentially more complex. That's just 4 servers. Imagine if I'm running 1,000 microservices. So, biggest piece of advice is don't try and do it manually. The volume of data, of information, of even just log data, let alone that deeper observability data coming directly out of applications. There's too much of it. Most of it's meaningless. That's a bit of a hot take. Everyone says, collect all the data. Got to get it all. And you do, because you need that bit that is meaningful. But if your application is continually sending you messages saying, I'm doing fine, you don't really care that much about that until it's not doing fine. So you've got to collect all this data. You can't not, but you can't process it manually. So automation, data processing, observability tooling, honestly, I'm from an IT ops background where I hugged servers and I read log files directly and so forth. And in IT ops, in cloud operations, we're to give that up. We're going to get to where developers have been for a long time. Abstraction. Developers are comfortable with abstraction. They abstract memory. They abstract processes, functions. They call functions. They don't know what they're doing inside. They just know about call and response. And they're comfortable with that because that's normal. In IT operations, in cloud operations, we're a little bit more circumspect about that. We have to see what we're running. We literally used to see physical servers that we were running. We've got to get away from that. So deal with abstractions, virtual machines, containers, serverless functions. Get into these reusable capabilities. It will reduce your complexity over time, because just think of maybe an addressing service. If I'm selling T-shirts or widgets or whatever, I might want to use my addressing service in marketing to go and talk to my customers about what's coming. I might want to use my addressing service in delivery to send them a product they just bought. I don't need to write that code twice. So start to look at consolidating, using multi-function services. Use the cloud for what it's good for. Scale, agility, flexibility, and really take advantage of those architectural features. But yeah, absolutely operate and manage it like it's at scale, because it is. And use the tools, use the automation, use the observability, use the analytics to really get inside and understand what data matters and what doesn't.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I've talked to a lot of business leaders who have adopted a cloud first strategy, and I oftentimes hear them say things like, "We didn't think we were going to spend as much, right? We thought this would be cheaper. We thought, this, that, the other." And if you think about it, in some instances, if you don't have the proper governance and observability, a private cloud is a fixed cost. Oftentimes, either if you're buying it from an MSP, you know what your monthly fee is, and it may be fixed if it's not variable in usage. Or if you've put it in your own data center and you've got a private cloud, you've paid for that hardware, and now you've got licensing fees. But in a more public cloud arena, you're dealing with, did I allow this application to spin up more compute? Perhaps it was misconfigured, or we forgot to turn something off after we did a proof of concept or something like that. How do you, what in your experience, what have you seen as far as how companies are thinking about getting better at managing their costs?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I'll tell you my own story as CTO of my last company. I was consistently being asked to take money out. My company was aiming for an acquisition offer. We were looking for a good exit. We did eventually get that offer, but as CTO, I had to take cost out of the business. And part of that, and every CIO and CTO who is watching you listening will know your cloud bill is probably one of the biggest single line items in your budget, especially if you add up all your cloud bills, right? SaaS, PaaS, infrastructure, on-prem, public, whatever it is. So yeah, you've absolutely got to manage those costs, stay on top of it. Data analytics to do cost management, to understand what assets are actually driving value in your business versus what are maybe not driving as much value. Here's an exercise I did with a customer while I was at a vendor with doing data analytics was we looked at all of the development time spent in certain developer productivity tools. So we're thinking here things like Atlassian tools and GitHub tools, and these sorts of things. And this business was a large development shop for other businesses. So obviously profitability and productivity was super important to them, as were the cost of their cloud products, right? So we looked at all of how much time and effort did people use these specific products, competing repositories, a GitLab, a GitHub, a Subversion, or what have you. What applications were those specific developers and teams working on? What applications drove most of the revenue for the customer? And that's a really easy conversation. This is what I mean by data-driven decisions, by the way, Greg. Rather than going to the development team and saying, hey, I think we need to rationalize our cloud tools, and so I'm going to stop paying for this one. That CTO was able to go to the team and go, look, I know you're all using the tools you want, and they're probably all pretty good, but bottom line, we can't afford to have all these tools, and this is why. And here are the numbers. And here's why your tool's going away, because honestly, your application is not making enough money to support that key purchase. Little things like that, staying on top of obviously overruns, test and dev, automate the goodness out of those environments, right? So I was with a vendor, an infrastructure as code vendor recently. They were talking about their ability to create ephemeral instances of new testing environments. So exactly what you're saying, shut down those environments automatically after a certain time. Make that the default. Make people justify keeping instances up rather than forcing them to remember to bring them back down again. I personally know CIOs who have been sacked for six-figure cloud overruns, right? No one wants to be there. Stay on top of your costs, obviously. Automate the heck out of your dev test environment specifically, but also, if you can, your prod environment. And make sure your engineers all know what the data says about the profitability of what they're doing, how they're doing it, the tools they're using, the ecosystems they're using. And by the way, Greg, last thing you talked about, private cloud, have that authority to make those decisions to run things on-prem if you want to. If that's your shop, if that's what you've got, you're absolutely right. A lot of steady workloads are going to be more expensive in the cloud. Look, you get agility, you get flexibility, you get interconnectivity, you get global reach, you get a lot of other things. Repatriation is, a conversation item at the moment amongst a lot of my clients. Very few of them are thinking too seriously about it, but I'll tell you, most of my large enterprise clients have on-premises infrastructure too. And it's a choice they can make. I think it's a legitimate choice too.
Yeah, you think if you really want to get the most out of your IT, whether it's it could be speed to market, it could be cost, it could be whatever. I love the best venue approach. What is the best venue for this application based on the cost to operate, based on the security profile, based on our ability to manage it and support whatever it is, right? I think that's brilliant. I think I do, when I talk to business leaders who say we're all in on public cloud, we're never going to go to the public. I don't like we're all in on this or we're never this, because I think you really, I feel like you're limiting your ability to get the most out of the IT, right?
Exactly. You've got to make these pragmatic choices. It's something I've built a reputation around pragmatic choices, and I annoy some people because I don't go with the stylish dogma. I mean, this book is actually on building your own private cloud. I'm absolutely a cloud advocate. But there are times when you want to do it a little bit differently. There are times when you want to use your own system. There are times when you don't even want to use a VM. Look, my last role, I was a CTO of a video company. We had physical hardware that did video encoding, decoding. It was not your standard out-of-the-box Intel or ARM. It was dedicated chipsets and dedicated boxes that did video encoding. How do I move that to the cloud? Right? I used to be in mainframe. I'm still covering mainframe operations as an analyst. There are opportunities. There are companies that are doing mainframe hosting or mainframe emulation. Even Big Blue is getting into that and providing mainframe type services, even a mainframe cloud. But it's a platform choice. It's architectural choice. It's a business decision. I have problems with people say we're cloud only, we're open source only, we're whatever it is only. You're locking yourself into a decision you don't know that's going to be the right one. Make pragmatic decisions when you need to, and they might be we're cloud only now, but it's got to be a pragmatic decision. Cloud is just another architecture. It's just another platform. You can't say that I'm not going to use anything else. I agree with you, Greg. I think that's just the wrong decision.
Yeah, and we were talking about the cost aspect of it. Let's maybe talk a little bit about security. And I think your security, whether you're private cloud and you're autonomous in physical access and probably logical things, or you're in a shared responsibility model with a public cloud provider, it feels as if companies really have to be on top of things nowadays. The rate of change, the number of exploits, the routine sort of, you almost see, you don't even have to be super sophisticated anymore to get access to things that could damage a company or take their data, whatever. When you meet with companies, where do you start in that conversation about security, best practices, governance, all of that?
Yeah, I tell you, Greg, I'm a technologist. I love technology, right? I've been hands-on coding, and I built my own video game system when I was a kid. I love technology, but where I start, policy. Look, you've got to have the policy. Technology is only as good as the policy that it implements, right? When it comes to cybersecurity, governance, compliance, all of these sorts of things, you've got to start with policy, privacy policy, compliance policy, information asset use policy, access control policies. Look, it's not exciting work, but as a CTO, you've got to do it because that sets in writing the standard for everyone to follow. And if it requires you to implement technology to help them follow it, then go for it. But bottom line, you've got to have policy. You've got to have policy review and enforcement as well. So I always start with policy. It's really important to get the fundamentals right, and so everyone's on the same page and know what they have to do. From there, you can start to do some really useful things with technology. So look, obviously, identity and access management. You're going to have passwords, you have logons, you have restricted access to certain things in certain places, right? I do believe in observability for cybersecurity. Looking in that operational mode, SecOps, the security operations, understanding who's getting into systems, where, why, and how. And is it legitimate? Is it not legitimate? And I do believe that AI ops for cybersecurity is a really important part of that, applying machine learning to understand what is known good security practice versus a potentially known bad practice, and being able to identify those again with automation, because the data sets you're trying to pick these needles out of are massive. I definitely believe automation generally. Automation is just win-win-win for everyone, right? You save money because you do things faster, better, in process with automation instead of with humans. You free up creativity and innovation because that mundane routine stuff that I never wanted to do is being done by the computer, which is great. Frees up humans to think and imagine and do new things in new ways. It reduces errors because it does the right thing every time, or I assume you've coded it properly. And it improves compliance because of all of those things. So I'll give you a very specific example. If I want to deploy a new server into production, so I can go through all my change approvals and change approval boards and all this sort of stuff. I do think a lot of that still matters. But also I get to do it with an automated practice if I'm using automation. If I don't use automation, I get to put a server into production, which is something I think is probably known good, but might contain a vulnerability that I didn't know about. So all of a sudden, I'm opening myself up to exposure. If I use an automation routine, which is vetted and known to be good, then I just click a button and I get a server deployed in prod, which is safe and secure. So I definitely believe in these things. Start with policy. Absolutely. You've got to do the basic blocking and tackling, identity and access management, password controls, privileged password management, these sorts of things, separation of duties, using technologies, but then also applying automation, apply your known good practices so that even people who would not necessarily think security first don't even have to. They can just do secure things because as the leader, as a technology leader, you're putting in place technology to help people meet your policy objectives. So automation is super key there.
Yeah. So just to reiterate, so if you're a business leader, you want to evaluate where you are, or you want to begin fresh. You're thinking, start with corporate policy. That's going to drive everybody in the correct direction. Then you set up, sort of a defense in depth, sort of layered approach at all the different layers of security. And one of the things that I love to see, I don't know how many years ago this was, but you start to see self-healing in security, right? And so you talk about automation. I love automation that deploys things and that can change things, but self-healing, I think, just took that kind of to the next level, right? So you can see a bad thing happening. And if you see this bad thing happening with these markers, execute this, right? Stop bad things. Wonderful. I love that. So we talk about security. We talked about sort of cloud governance around cost. What are the markers of a company who is really on top of these things? If you've met with a company and they've got a cloud adoption strategy, whatever that means, it could be variations of cloud, hybrid, multi-cloud. How do you know, hey, they've really got it together? What are the key indicators that they're doing things well?
Yeah, look, some of the KPIs, and I literally take this as metrics, by the way. Some of the things that I look at is collaboration between teams, so cross-boundary collaboration. This is one of the most important things that I've done research on into how you drive business results, drive governance and cybersecurity benefits, drive productivity, actually drive employee happiness as well, by the way, is how well disparate teams collaborate and integrate and communicate with each other. So there you look at things like process. You look at efficiency and release, how quickly. So from a CTO perspective, I'm looking at developing, delivering, and running software. Whether it's in the cloud or on premises doesn't really matter. And so I'm looking for how efficient is that process. I'm looking for where in those boundary conditions do things fall through the cracks. So you look at value streams, right? This is a concept from the Toyota way and manufacturing, this idea that every step along the process adds value. For manufacturing, I put a steering wheel on a car, that adds value to the manufacturing of that car. I'm going to sell a car for a lot less without a steering wheel. Right? If I add a feature or a function to my software project, I'm adding value to that. When I do QA, I'm adding value. When I release a pod, I'm adding value. So looking at these steps and making sure there's no drop-offs in productivity in between those boundary lines, that's a huge indicator for me that they are connecting, collaborating, integrating. It's a DevOps concept. And I know from my own research that directly correlates to better outcomes for the business. So I absolutely start by looking at those boundary conditions. And I look at measuring from start to finish. And to start with, if you can't measure from start to finish, and by that I mean idea to cash, right? I've got an idea for a new product in the marketplace, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm selling it and I'm earning money, right? That's a whole cycle. If I can't measure that whole cycle, that's a red flag to me. I know at that point there's inefficiencies, there's gaps, there's people making decisions that are maybe less informed or maybe less appropriate for the entire business because they're not seeing outside of their own box. So yeah, I've got some metrics which say that there's goodness going on. It's mostly to do with collaboration, efficiency, and productivity. Some of those same metrics will throw up red flags for me as well.
Yeah, that's great. Is there an easy rule that you would use to know if a KPI is worth measuring? Is it a good KPI? Is this something worth measuring?
I don't know if it's an easy rule, but it's a rule. What are you going to do with this information? I literally have asked my people, they've come to me and said, oh, Andy, look at this number, look at this data point, or whatever it is. Like, okay, great. What are you now going to do about that? And again, I like to ask the question, right? I don't turn around and say, I think that's a useless number. I just say, well, that's interesting. What are you going to do to change that? If there's no answer to that, then just stop. Go move on to the next thing. We've got enough stuff in our lives, in our business lives specifically. We don't need to rash and spin wheels on numbers that don't matter. So yeah, that's the big one for me. It's just, what are you going to do about it? If there's no doing, maybe move on.
Yeah. Let's switch up a little bit. You had mentioned AI earlier, and you were I think the point you were making was around using AI for AI ops or operations. What's your take on what's going on with AI and where are the use cases? I mean, I do agree with you. I think there are some very, very good use cases. And then there are some things where I think there's thought or time being spent where I'm going, oh, I don't know if that's going to get you what you're looking for, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. How do you think about it? What are the real use cases versus maybe where, it still needs to bake a little bit?
Yeah, I think you're spot on, actually, Greg. Look, I'm a bit of a skeptic and a bit of a pragmatist. And so I look at all this stuff going, yeah, good, but what am I going to do with it? Coming back to that fundamental question, right? Now, in my world, dev and ops, right, there are lots of great use cases for AI, specifically the newest, generative AI using existing language models to understand what language is. And that could be, by the way, English or German or French, but it could also be C++ or Python. It could also be the language of my documentation set. And using that generative AI to take a lot of the mundane routine away from technology-focused humans. Now, this is really interesting to me. My first degree was a Bachelor of Arts in English. So I understand language to an extent. And I look at this, I look at all the people I work with, and often they don't. And so for a developer to write an epic, a story, a persona, that can be a bit challenging sometimes. So I get them to use Gen AI to write those. Put another use case in my world of IT operations is the post-incident review. So when you have a problem, you go through the incident, then you fix the problem and review that incident. What happened? Why did it happen? What did you do to fix it? What should you do next time to stop it happening again? So when you're doing problem resolution, you are 100 miles an hour. Everyone is panicked. You've got your system down. Customers can't buy. Your executive's on your case, maybe just leaning over your shoulder. You've got to get it fixed, get it done. Afterwards, you've got to go back and look at all your notes, chat logs, console records. What commands did you issue? What systems did you change? What happened? What worked? What didn't? To do this post-incident review. Feed it all into generative AI, especially if your Gen AI has been trained on not just English language, but also on your system's language. So I'm not talking about code, but what does your system look like? What is your architecture? What is a known good deployment? What is a known good performance level? These sorts of things. And Gen AI is actually pretty spectacular in synthesizing all, taking the mundane routine work of a human going out and collecting all this data points and all this narrative, putting it all together and presenting it to the team. Get that all done by a computer because it's all there. So there are really good use cases, but you know what? It's also a case of Amara's law. I think Amara's law, if I can quote it properly, is we overestimate the impact of technology in the short term and we underestimate the impact of the technology in the long term. Right now, we're overestimating the impact of AI in the short term. There's so far to go. I just look at the suggestions on Netflix for my queue, the suggestions on Google for my news reading. Today, I got a news article from Asheville, North Carolina, because yesterday I looked up burritos in Boulder. And so there's this new burrito joint in Asheville. I don't know. Is this actually useful? So look, I think there are magnificent use cases for AI. I use AI even now. I don't get it to write my stuff. I get it to turn my bullet points into prose. It's a routine, mundane thing that it can do easily because I've trained it on my style. It's still my words. It's still my ideas. What we are not going to be able to do is just set AI free to go and run our businesses, to find our customers, to build new products, to create marketing messages, even as we've seen, to do some imagery with 7 fingers and 3 legs and stuff. AI is getting really good with some amazing use cases and will be revolutionary like the internet was, like automation was, like cloud was. But we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that the promise is definitely there, right? Although the power to run everything that everybody wants may not be yet, or whatnot. I'm really interested, and I'm curious in your thoughts on how AI could transform operations in the coming years. If you think about being able to turn AI loose on your CMDB so it knows all the assets and the connectivity of those assets, and then being able to see at an organization level, small changes in what's happening with the infrastructure, how it's being used, and what you can infer from that. What's your best? And I know it's like, no one has a crystal ball, but what would you expect to see? What do you think we're going to see there?
Yeah, I'm actually saying, depending on what you call it, AI, ML, a series of complex if-then-else statements. I'm actually already seeing this in operations. So predictive analytics is actually already a thing in IT operations, looking at known good patterns of performance and availability and uptime and so forth, and then using that to predict what you should be doing in terms of the capacity growth, but also looking at known bad process and bad situations so that you can look at what caused those. You go back and you train your machine learning algorithms to understand what happened leading up to that problem. And is that consistent? Every time we have that problem, the same things happen in the lead up. So now I can learn, my machine can learn what the problem is before it happens. So when with one customer, one large financial organization, I remember just this process saved them 9 seconds from when the problem was going to happen. And it gave them 9 seconds warning. And we think, that's nothing, right? 9 seconds. What can you do in 9 seconds? I'll tell you what, automation in 9 seconds can fix the problem. Humans can't. Automation can fix that problem in 9 seconds. And it's not just that you fix the problems that you didn't get the outage, you didn't make the call out, you didn't get 15 people on a conference call, you didn't shut down your t-shirt ordering business, right? So AI and AI ops is already playing in these areas of predictive analytics and so forth for capacity planning, but also for problem remediation and problem prevention. I love what you're talking about, the idea of making your assets dynamic in a cloud computing environment, especially. The idea of a CMDB just rankles with me. Difficult. CMS, even a content configuration management system, little bit better. It's federated. There's more opportunity to have variation. But every single CMS or CMDB I've ever seen or worked with is always out of date. Literally always. Doesn't matter how good your discovery is for the most part. If you're not constantly discovering, continuously discovering, it's out of date. Using AI to understand what a good configuration looks like, what your entire architecture looks like, what a good architecture looks like in a busy period versus in a slow period. And then using that to drive automation to right-size your configurations and provisions, keep your cloud costs down by dynamically working on a known set of knowledge known good process, known good architecture, known good performance rates, known good security, detection prevention. And then you can apply that. So look, AI is already making a pretty big impact in IT operations. I want to see a lot more because I do want to see that intelligence coming out of a system to be able to make those decisions proactively but pragmatic.
Yeah. Again, the promise is there. I guess we'll see where it lands.
We're also getting a lot of the vendors talking about using AI to help people do their job. So observability vendors who are training AI on their documentation so that when I jump in and there's a problem, I go, what's this problem and how do I fix it? And the AI will go, well, I've seen this problem 3 times before. 2 times before we fixed it this way. Here's the documentation of our product on what commands you should issue. Should I issue them for you now? This is going to be super positive for people and for systems.
Yeah, and it's going to do a lot for site reliability and availability for companies who use those systems to run their business or deliver critical infrastructure. It's sort of a more philosophical question. What can AI do to make lives better for people outside of IT operations? Do you have a sense of what it's going to do for us in general?
Yeah, outside of IT, certainly there's also benefits in development, in compliance, in security and cybersecurity teams, and so forth. Outside of AI, outside of IT specifically, but not my special subject. IT is definitely my special subject. And yeah, in the mode of your question about crystal balls, look, I see it as an industrial revolution again. It's an industrial revolution, just like the industrial revolution, of course. But I feel like internet was a bit like the same, cloud was a bit of the same. This is going to be along that same vector, I believe, the same magnitude as well. It'll fundamentally change a lot of things. It'll help a lot of people. I see it being applied to creative industries, and I find problems with that because humans are the creators. We're great at creativity, and I would rather see AI be used to get rid of the mundane, routine, boring, the automatable. I do think that it's going to help us with cross-cultural communication and collaboration. The idea that I can use an AI to understand someone in Japan or Tajikistan or Brazil, and I can talk to them in their language and my language, and they can understand that because AI is this ability to understand human communication to a large degree. And I can just talk English to them and they can talk Brazilian or Tajiki or whatever it is, Japanese to me. That sort of thing is really cool. I've experimented with that on video in my last role. I do believe that AI will put a lot of people out of work. The automobile did as well, right? Nobody with manufacturers we talk about. It's going to do that. We're going to have to reskill people. I think it's going to take a lot of political will. I'm not going to get into politics or economics too much, but the idea that we free up lots of people by using computers, what are the people going to do there? How are they going to get paid? How are they going to buy the goods and services from the companies that are putting in AI and getting rid of workers? There's going to have to be some significant cultural and political and economic changes, I think, because this will upset a lot of industries, a lot of individual roles, and jobs will go away. But new jobs will come as well. We're already seeing prompt engineer as a role, right? Someone who knows how to ask the right questions of the artificial intelligence. Oh my goodness, it's Douglas Adams all over again, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right?
Yeah.
What is the question to the answer of 42, the life, universe, and everything? So these things, new jobs are going to come about, right? We're not going to have telephone cleaners, but we are going to have prompt engineers, and data science is going to boom. There's going to be a lot of great jobs for people, but we do have to deal with the idea that we're going to get rid of a lot of jobs as well, specifically working class, unskilled jobs. And we have to figure out how do we keep those people in our society. And that's a whole different question, which I do not have the qualifications to answer.
Yeah, folks of the age of myself and perhaps you, they can remember when the internet wasn't a thing, and then it became a thing, and we had the same conversations. Some people said, "Oh, this is no one's going to conduct business over the internet," or it's not going to transform the economy, and here we are. And we tuned to that, right? The culture shifted, jobs changed. Some jobs went away; they were replaced with other things, and I expect that will probably happen, just like you said.
And I mean, do you remember when they said never put your credit card on the internet?
Yes.
Never put your credit card on the web, right?
Yes.
Is that gone, right? We will change our attitudes to this as well, right? But you're right; it's something we've got to pay attention to.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know we've taken a lot of your time and really appreciate it. My last question for you is, when you get the chance to talk to, a leader, a business leader, if you could tell them one or two things that are really important about thinking about their IT strategy for success, what are those general things? Do you have any words of wisdom for those leaders who might be listening?
Oh, I don't know how wise I am, mate. Look, some of the things I would say, set your people up for success with guardrails, but not roadblocks. So give them guardrails. Don't let them go off the freeway, but let them go fast on the freeway. Right? Give them brakes so that if they go too fast, you can slow down. So what I'm talking about here is things like give them resources, give them tools, make sure the tools monitor what they do, monitor those metrics that matter, interdict when you need to, but don't go looking for activity metrics or vanity metrics just to, get in people's shorts. Set your people up for success. Innovation is a contact sport. Collaboration is a contact sport. I'm a very big fan of remote work from home. I think it is the future of work. But by the same token, individuals, humans have to, as a technology leader, understand the humanity of what you're doing. Tech is great and I love it, but it doesn't exist without the humans creating it, running it. So understand the human aspects of build, and plan and build and run. Connect teams together. I cannot overemphasize this enough for C-level leaders in technology especially. You're in control of your org chart. Make it work. Make people work together. At my last job, I crushed 3 teams into one. That bad word, crushed. I brought 3 teams together because I wanted them to collaborate and communicate. We had separate teams for off-site and on-prem, right? For cloud versus on-prem operations and development. It's like, no, we're a hybrid business. Everyone needs to understand the trade-offs we're making, whether we go to cloud or stay on-prem or not. Right? So I wanted to bring all those teams together. So collaboration, innovation, they are absolutely contact sports. Flow. Understand and honor flow in your world. This is the idea you get it in sports, you get it in writing, basketball players talk about, Michael Jordan talked about, the bucket was this big, right? You get in those zones is what sports players talk about. I get it riding a bicycle. Sometimes I get it skiing. Sometimes I get it writing. Developers get it writing code. So this is the idea that you get into a hyper-focused state when you're doing this creative work. It takes a while to get into. So if you interrupt one of your team, and it's so bad, managers do this all the time. Management by walking you around, I get it. But if you walk up to a developer and say, hey, can you just answer this question for me quickly? You've just wasted close to an hour of their creative time. Statistics show it takes about 20 to 30 minutes to get into flow. And then you're disrupted for about 20 or 30 minutes when you're taken out of flow. Productivity, if you care about productivity, you've got to understand flow and honor it for your team. Like I said before, diversity. Look at your diversity for a business reason. It'll help you make money. It'll help you come up with better ideas. Give your people time and space to be creative. If you want to drive innovation, now don't get me wrong, some C-level people don't want to drive innovation. They're in boring industries where that's not important. Honestly, these are just not my customers. If you want to drive innovation, you've got to support that. As I said before, you've got to have executive support. You've got to give time, resources, and people. You've got to free up that time. It doesn't have to be Google time, like one day a week. By the way, Google time doesn't exist anymore. But give time. Protect that time to let people innovate. And the last thing, to a degree, you've got to tolerate failure. Failure is the story of innovation. Innovation is the story of failure. 95% of startups fail, but it's within reason, right? Fail fast, fail small, fail cheap, and fail forward. And I will support you every time. It means you tried something new. Maybe it didn't work, but it didn't cost a lot, didn't take a lot of time, it didn't mess up badly, and you learned from it. So tolerate failure, otherwise you'll never encourage innovation. So those are some of the things that I would always encourage in senior leadership in a technology world.
Yeah, that's great advice. There were a lot of really good nuggets in there. That whole thing about, you said build them guardrails, not roadblocks. That needs to go on a t-shirt, Andy, or put it in a right? Hey, listen, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. It was a delight to talk with you. And where can folks find you? I'm assuming your Twitter and other things, right?
Yeah, Greg, I'm on all the things. So you can always find Sageable, sageable.com, at Sageable on various media, Twitter, Mastodon. I'm at Andi Mann, ANDIMANN. And yeah, I'm on X/Twitter, Mastodon, Blue Sky. Since the diaspora, I'm on all the social media, LinkedIn, of course, Threads. Find me anywhere. Look, you can find my phone number online. Give me a call. It's just right here.
No, be careful what you ask for, right? No, listen, thank you. Really appreciate it, Andy. And we'd love to have you back again if you're open to it at some time in the future.
Absolutely. It was so much fun. Really interesting to share my ideas with you. I really enjoyed talking with you, Greg.